Hi everyone. Today I'm joined by Sarah at Shop Circle. They're a number one provider of e-commerce software. Their mission is to help brands scale with high performance tech. They're literally shaping the future of e-commerce with their software. Part of their growth over the years has been acquiring e-commerce apps, which in turn increases their clients' profitability. Today, we're discussing Sarah's journey entering the e-commerce industry by joining Shop Circle just over a year ago, her love for product management, using her development skills, design, UX, creative background to ensure that their new product releases really hit the mark. So quite a big intro there, Sarah, in terms of how great this is going to be and how much we're going to hear about how incredible you are and all this sort of good stuff. So before further ado, if people don't know who you are, tell everyone sort of who is Sarah.
Thank you so much for that really kind introduction, Luke.
That's okay.
So I'm Sarah, I'm product manager at Shop Circle. I think to really get to know who I am, we need to go back in time. So I found myself in e-commerce really quite randomly. If you asked me 4 years ago where I would see myself in 4 years' time, I would have probably told you in blockchain, crypto, fintech, or the fintech industry. Only one thing remains the same from that is that I still work in a startup, which I absolutely love. The ability to see a business grow from the ground up and have a say in that growth without being a cog in a machine, as the corporate word say, is what I live for. But let's go back in time to explain really who I am and how I became who I am today. So I graduated with a bachelor's in business and IT, and then I landed my full first-time job as a front-end developer in a B2B SaaS company called Wiser, where I was hired by an old lecturer of mine. And this is actually quite an interesting point, as you're going to see further down the line. I was the first employee there, so like in a true tech startup fashion, my role quickly evolved from front-end development to include digital marketing, UX, and UI design. As far as first jobs go, in my opinion, I hit the jackpot. I was able to try different passions of mine and explore what I really want to do. And after 3 years at the company, I decided I wanted to leave home and do a master's in digital transformation management and leadership. And during that course, I was exploring what I wanted to do after. Obviously, you go into the course and everyone's like, okay, why are you in this course? What do you want to do? And I was one of those people who's like, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. I'm here to figure it out. What I didn't know is that I wanted a new challenge. And I'm the type of person that's constantly pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And at that time, I was also a big fan of Gary Vee, who is a firm believer that in your 20s, that you should really mix things up and find what you're passionate about. And in 30s, you'll sort itself out. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed what I was doing. I still really love the Web3 industry and generative AI, and I still follow it very closely. But I thought I might as well try something else. And if I really don't enjoy what I'm doing, I can always go back to that. So now comes back to the interesting bit. So during my master's, history tended to repeat itself. And my lecturer, Luca, who is the co-founder of Shop Circle, reached out and asked me if I wanted to interview for a role at Shop Circle. I didn't know much about product management at that time at all, in all honesty. It was also a completely new term to me. So I researched it. And then I realized it was like a brilliant fit it was with my history of front-end development, UX, UI, digital marketing. Pretty much took all the aspects I enjoyed of those roles and put it into one. And I had never been in the e-commerce industry before that either. So it was a new challenge. I was like, okay, let's go for it. Let me try it. And 1 year on, I can say that I've learned so much about the industry and I really don't regret it one bit. And you would be so surprised with how much of my knowledge from a tech background in terms of Web3 and generative AI have come in handy in my role today.
I bet. Amazing. It says a lot about you, I guess, Sarah, that you've been offered two opportunities through two lecturers when you've been learning about, industry specific sort of courses as well. So sounds like you've got a good sense for it also in your side about finding the right type of things to go after.
Yeah, I think so. It's a good sign, I guess.
Absolutely. And you say the last year your role's changed a little bit as well, hasn't it? In that last year from when you joined to where you are now?
Yes. So what really changed for me is that I started off as a junior product manager intern, and as of April now, I'm a product manager. I was given more responsibility over time. I started off managing 2 apps, and then that grew to 4 apps, and now I'm managing 2 different apps as well as internal tools, which is super interesting as well, because I get to see, okay, what tools does the company need internally and what features are needed for the internal stakeholders in the company to manage the growth of these apps and see the opportunities that are needed. So it's a different aspect. But what's nice about this is that I get to touch points with all of other stakeholders within the company. I get to touch points with all my colleagues, and I've gotten well known within the company itself because of that as well, which is a really nice aspect to it. And I'm hoping it's going to take me to more of a senior product role.
Amazing. No, fair play to you and well done. Um, and in terms of like ecom, then, so you've been in e-commerce now for just over a year. Like you mentioned already, like how much love you got for it. But what is it that I guess like every day like makes you excited about what you're doing and sort of going back to the intro about really transforming the ecom sector with the software? Like, talk to me more about that, please.
So I would say one of the aspects is the people itself. The industry is like no other. Everyone is so helpful, super fun. If you ever go to one of the networking events, it's like a massive party and every time. And if you ever need advice, everyone is always willing to give a helping hand, which is such a refreshing industry to be in, to be honest, from the blockchain industry where everyone's like, okay, you have to sell, you have to buy, you have to sell, you have to buy. It's helpful, but this was something else, something I wasn't used to. Besides that, the industry itself is progressing very fast. So although the recession had seen a slight slowdown, I mean, the future is e-commerce really. As a 1997 baby, I fall somewhere between a millennial and a Gen Z. And I see the trend of people in my generation wanting convenience over everything else. So like gone are the days where people used to travel to get their Christmas shopping done, when they can happily sit on their sofa in their sweatpants and get it done in a couple of hours while instantly price comparing and getting the best deals. I mean,
Yeah,
that was not a thing 20 years ago.
yeah,
Myself,
agreed.
I'm a big online shopper as well. So I see the apps like product manager, I product manage, and I see them being used by some of my favorite brands. And that excitement just never
Yeah,
fades.
amazing. I love that. And I guess being a online shopper, as you say, gives you that insight from a consumer's point of view about, that UX element, right? In terms of actually the user
Definitely.
experience, that it's the right way of doing it.
Definitely. And it actually happens to be like sometimes I'll be online shopping and I'm like, they could actually really use one of our apps. Their UX is slacking. They don't have enough
Yeah.
convenience on the store, which is quite funny from my perspective.
What happens, and then in instances, do you sort of tell someone and they reach out, or do you reach out to them and say, "Hey, you
In
should
some
come to Shop
cases, I
Circle"?
would, yes. If I see like a really brilliant fit and I see that they're a massive brand and they could potentially afford one of our higher plans in our apps, I definitely would. Other times, I was like, this is good to know. Something that we
Yeah,
can use internally to help our partners as well.
yeah, a bit of compressed analysis almost as well. You tell yourself that when you're spending the money, right? So it makes it almost worthwhile.
Exactly, exactly.
What are the biggest challenges you've faced so far then from coming into e-commerce from obviously a very different background?
So I think it's understanding the market itself. So e-commerce is quite a large industry and there are a lot of terms which I had no idea even existed, like lifetime value, MRR. To me, these were not terms that I was using on a day-to-day basis as much as I'm using now, especially knowing the difference between a customer and a merchant. That took me a month just to simply grasp, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but I think one of the biggest challenges I faced is understanding the changing market in terms of what features are needed and what the customers want. When generative AI came out, I mean, there was a big pivot to implement it in all your products and how you can make the most of it to be more competitive as well. And that was quite as they say, a rat race, really, to be the
Mhm.
first one to do it. Being customer centric is also, I think, another big challenge where I face on a daily basis. Um, the likelihood of getting customer feedback is very slim. They just, it's no one really responds to surveys and stuff like that. So it's hard to find workarounds around that and see, okay, what is actually needed? What are they doing? What do they want, really?
Yeah.
Competition is also very high,
Yeah,
I
of
would
course.
say. You always have to take a step back and think, okay, what is our USP? You always have to constantly monitor the competitors as well and say, did they implement anything that is undercutting us? Can we undercut them in anyhow, besides pricing, by features? And providing probably the most user-friendly experience
Yeah.
when constrained by Shopify is I think one of the largest challenges as well, because Shopify has a lot of guidelines that are constantly changing without any warning, and suddenly you have to comply to these guidelines. And if you're not on it, you've lost it.
Yeah. So just a few challenges then, just a few
Just
things
a few.
happening.
Not much at all.
Okay, and in terms of like your own, I guess like career, if you will, right? In terms of your development over the last sort of year or so, like what's the next year look like? Do you think for Sarah at Shop Circle? What is your like career development going to look like?
So I'm hoping to stay on the path of keeping to the internal tools and the apps itself. We have some exciting things coming up where I'm fully product managing some of the internal tools. And that's going to require big change. And these are massive projects, which will probably actually take a year to implement, if I'm
Okay.
being completely honest, because they're literally the whole set of tools that the internal people in the company, from sales to partners to developers, which will be using. I'm hoping to grow within that role and get enough experience to move towards a senior product management role.
Do you, so in terms of how you work, as you mentioned with the products and the internal tools, so Shop Circle's business, I guess, is that they acquire like really cool apps that are almost disrupting or adding a lot of value to market. So how does that work with your role? Do you get, is it like a case of, because I know like Opinu is one obviously that was purchased what probably same time around you sort of joined rough around that sort of year ago, wasn't it? So do you get told, okay, we've just like, we're going to acquire this, let's look at sort of that app and what we can do to improve it, or how does that sort of side of it work?
No, so actually, we're not told what we're being acquired until it's actually required. For the most part of it, it's kept quite under wraps for obvious reasons. But the moment it is acquired, it's full speed ahead. It gets basically to a team, and they have their own set of product managers. Unless you acquire the whole company itself, and it comes with its own product managers. But we're told on the day that it's acquired, or when we're very close to acquiring, and we start preparing for that internally in terms of delegating resources towards it, in terms of marketing, fixing the website, etc. But there's not much in terms of preparations. Okay, what can you do with this app? That's pretty much from day one, we start going on it. To be honest, we don't even have the time. I mean, we grew from 7 apps to 40 apps within a year, and that's a lot to handle for the team. I mean, obviously we are growing as a team as well, but it is still very overwhelming to get used to these apps and continue growing them while also growing new apps as well.
Wow, 70 to 40 in a year. Wow, that's quite a
Yeah,
jump, isn't it?
it is. It is quite a jump, but it's a measure of success. Honestly, it's
Yes, that's true.
hats off to Luca and Gian Maria, because they built something that was this great.
Yeah. Where the idea, I mean, again, I know it's maybe more of a Luca question, but where the idea like come from in terms of the business itself? Where does Shop Circle like come from? Do you know?
To be honest, I have no idea. That's definitely a question for them.
Yeah, because just yeah, that's the idea of it is incredible. Okay, and in terms of you've talked about like competitors, you've talked about like new people coming to the market as well. What makes Shop Circle distinct, if you will, from others in the marketplace? How would you differentiate your service from another sort of competitor?
So to be honest, I think we are, if not, we are the largest developer in the Shopify ecosystem with 40 apps under our belt. I don't think there are any other developers with so many apps. And I think this works in our favor because we have so many opportunities internally that we can create within the company by offering so many apps. For example, we offer top tier support on all of them. We're working towards offering 24/7 support on most of the apps, if not all of them. But the beauty of it is the fact that the apps can also work together. The idea is that they work seamlessly together, which is unique for most of the other apps, because most app developers have, I would say, 5 to 10 apps, and in a very odd case they have more than that, but even 10 apps is quite a lot for a developer to have. But it's nice that we're that those 40 apps we're working towards working together, and I think that's a big differentiator, because it's apps that don't work together which separate the system and give like a stepping stone kind of service.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, just thinking about all the apps that you can, because I say it's such a quick change in sector, isn't it? Like if you know you've got an opportunity with a client to make a huge difference to their bottom line through like partnering up a couple of apps, then it could be a game changer for a lot of businesses, can't it?
It can. And I think what's really interesting is that we're eventually, I don't know if we are yet, but eventually we'll probably be a one-stop shop for every store that's being created, because we have an app that is in every, that caters towards something. Anything you need, we would have that app. That is, I think, the differentiating factor. And again, because I said they work together, it's even better.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, it really is. And in terms of so is your stakeholders, if you will, are they internal, or do you deal sort of the client sort of side as well? How does your sort of like day to day work in terms of sort of stakeholder management as well?
So because I deal with internal apps, mine's a mix of both. I have the 2 apps which are merchant facing, and those are external stakeholders. And they're actually very hard to get in touch with, if I'm being honest, because again, as much as customer centric I want to be, it's very hard to get in touch with them and get them to get the feedback unless they're actively reaching out for support. But in the internal tools, my stakeholders are all internal, and that's making sure that the C-suite is happy, explaining to the C-suite that this needs to happen for XYZ and what benefits are going to come out of it, and then speaking to other stakeholders within the company, saying, okay, what do you need? And obviously for every app, it's completely different. So it's finding a middle ground that's going to be catering towards all of the apps at the same time, but still being useful enough overall, if you get what
Yeah,
I mean.
yeah, I do. Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's a lot of moving, spinning plates, and
It
that's the
is.
beauty, I guess,
It
of
is.
doing it all, isn't it?
It's a kind of, I feel like it's like a play where you have a lot of moving pieces, but it beautifully comes
Yeah,
together at the end, and not many people understand why or how it happened,
yeah,
but it does.
love that. And how have you sort of found it from a employee point of view in terms of the culture within Shop Circle? What makes it such an amazing place to be part of?
I mean, I'll be honest, Shop Circle did scale very quickly, and obviously that does have its hiccups along the way.
Uh-huh.
It happens in every company. It happened to Airbnb. I remember I was seeing an ex-employee of Airbnb, but I do feel like that Shop Circle managed it well. The culture has moved away from a startup culture and more towards a corporate environment,
Okay.
but it's expected when you grow from a number of tens in employees to hundreds. It happens. It's bound to
Yeah.
happen. But the flexibility is still there, which is what I really like. We're still fully remote as a company, which is fantastic. We've implemented
Yeah.
a few corporate like rules, but it's pretty much very flexible still. So the culture did change, but it's still very friendly and very transparent as it was in the beginning.
Yeah. Because you're Malta, aren't you? You're telling me pre-recording about how warm it is over there today, and it's but you're in Malta. How what's your sort of split? Do you do in terms of? I remember when we first spoke, you mentioned you're in London. You try and come as much as possible to, as I say, come to the events, be that the face of it. So you can see the other tech partners, you can meet the agencies, the brands. What's your sort of split like? You try to do yourself?
So I'm actually based in Malta, but I travel frequently. As you said, I travel to London. I feel like the e-commerce industry, besides America, is rather big in London, and a lot of the networking events happen there. And I love networking, so I try to be there as much as possible. I would say at least once every quarter, I would go up for a while. But I also travel elsewhere just to benefit from the fact that I work remotely. So I'll go visit friends in France or in Germany or in Spain. And the fact that I can is a
Amazing.
big
It's a
benefit.
great benefit, isn't it?
I would say in the e-commerce industry, it's not unique. Quite a lot of e-commerce companies work remotely rather than other industries where people are pulling people back into the office. It's still quite remote in the e-commerce industry.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned about obviously the growth and the change of the business. How it's gone from sort of because they're now about to sort of mid 60s employees, I think roughly, isn't it, as a business from what I remember from like directly employed by Shop Circle, I believe.
Yes, exactly. I think that's around
And you've
60.
then got the apps and the externals around that as well, of course.
Exactly. In total, that's equates to over 100 if you count all of that.
Yeah. And in terms of like how do they keep the culture in terms of that bigger picture thinking in terms of being best of class? Like how have the sort of senior team managed to keep that culture and people engaged from everyone around the world?
To be honest, this all equates down to the brilliant people team we have because they've taken the feedback. They've asked us for frequent feedback, I think, on a quarterly basis, and they take that feedback and they implement it. They listen to the employees who are there for a while and say, okay, do you like what's happening? Are you still happy in the company? Are you happy to come into the company every day? Would you recommend it to your friend? And
Yeah,
things like that. I think that makes a difference because you can really say a lot about the company when it is caring about its employees, which is nice. They're also very transparent still. As I said before, they, whenever something's happening or they, for example, during the recession, they would explain to us, okay, this is happening now, but we're expecting this in the future. Don't worry. No one's losing their jobs.
yeah,
You're very secure, which from a people perspective is nice to listen to, especially when you see that in the tech industry there was a
yeah,
massive round of layoffs you were hearing every day. So
yeah,
they were gentle and transparent towards that. And they
yeah. It makes a
tried to
big
have
difference.
it does make a big difference. And it's underrated what a big difference it does make, to be honest,
Mm,
I think.
agreed.
Besides that, I would say they also have some sort of team building activities every so often where we have group discussions based on either ethics or gender equality and things like that, which is
Yeah.
nice.
And it sounds like they actually listen to your feedback as well, which again is it's all well and good asking the questions, but as you're taking it on board and implementing ideas or changes or whatever it might be, it does make it keeps people actually engaged and wanting to stay in the business for a lot longer.
Yes, yes, honestly, it does, I think it makes a
Agreed.
massive difference.
I mean, we've already talked about this a little bit. I must admit, when we discussed like your background and your journey into Shop Circle, but if you were having to like pick out almost your top three, either things that have happened since you've been in the business, or in terms of like what you enjoy the most about being part of Shop Circle, what would you say they are?
That's a really good question. I would say the fact one that we're fully remote. I think having people being exposed to such an international set of people is so beautiful, and everyone has their own cultures. And don't get me wrong, it is a challenge sometimes, because working remotely with people whose English perhaps is not their second language, if not first, if it's their third language, miscommunication does happen. But it's so beautiful to see how everyone works together, and how respectful everyone is, and how curious everyone is about each other's culture. I think that's a very nice aspect to it. One of the I would say most memorable things, because again, I joined last July, and I think when I joined, there were only 7 apps.
Wow. Okay.
And
Yeah.
then we had acquired a company called Hulk, and that was a big change all at once, because they had a number of apps. I think their apps like overthrew our apps in terms of numbers. So it was quite a big change for us, and that was a very exciting time in the company as well. It was We celebrated well with that as well. We were all very happy, and it happens with every acquisition. To be honest, everyone's super happy and welcoming everyone aboard and wanting to get to know them. It's quite a welcoming environment, which is what I
Yeah.
really like.
Yeah. Just had a quick look at Hulk. We've been talking and seeing sort of the apps that they're the best in class Shopify apps. Some of the clients that have the brands, like you've got, Gatorade, you've got Victoria Beckham on there, Patagonia, like you've got some huge brands as well. And that must bring such a great buzz as well, doesn't it? In terms of,
It is. And it's quite, again, as I said before, when you're working for these apps and you see the brands you love use them, that is so exciting.
yeah, absolutely. It's similar to obviously with regards to recruitment, right? When I'm speaking to clients, and if it's a brand that I love or a brand that I have got some affiliation with, or a business who I know look after their staff exceptionally well, like Shop Circle do, when you're having them conversations with potential candidates, you're able to really give them a lot more than just like the company name and job description. You can give them a lot more background about the growth, around their plans, around what they do, all that bigger picture stuff makes such a huge difference, doesn't it, for finding the right people who fit the culture within the business as well.
It does. And that's actually quite a selling point for you, isn't it? It makes it much easier to sell the role to someone.
Yeah, because I mean, we generally want to work with businesses who provide that amazing place to work for their employees. Because it's not just their reputation; it's also ours as well at Fulfilled, to make sure that we know what's going on in the market as well. And that's why ecom is one of, if not the most exciting industries to be involved in, because as you say, there's so bigger opportunities, isn't there? In terms of what they do, like I guess that you would put Shop Circle within a tech arm, wouldn't you, of ecom? But then you've got your brands and you've got your agencies, and you said that collaboration piece is so like I for me, like, collaboration is a huge thing anyway. And then when we talked about doing this podcast, the amount of outreach that I had about it to come on board and talk about their stories and to discuss, the good, the bad, and all that sort of in between as well, and the challenges. And it's not all pretty pictures and all that stuff. Is that there's a lot of, people make mistakes, and people do the wrong things. It's about actually owning them and being able to learn as well.
Yes, yes. And I don't know about what trends you're seeing in this market, but I know from my experience, when I'm looking for a job, I think the most important thing is the culture within the company and the environment within the company. I remember when I was initially looking for a job, I would reach out to people on LinkedIn and be like, what is it really like to
Mm.
work there? Do you enjoy working there?
Yeah.
Because if you end up in a job and you feel like, okay, I don't really get along with my colleagues, there's a very toxic environment, I think that's the worst thing you can do, really.
Yes.
It sets you back in a way, and it's a bit
Yeah. Agreed.
demotivating.
Yeah. And it sounds like the two clients you've worked for so far, and especially Shop Circle, it's the right cultural fit for what you want to do. And in terms of, it sounds like you'll never have 2 days the same. The opportunity is going to keep coming in terms of your own like career development and progression as well, which, you talked about being a 9 to 7 baby. Like you obviously are very keen to sort of keep cracking on and sort of growing that opportunity as well within the business.
Yes, for sure.
Very good. Okay. And in terms of what advice would you, so you've already mentioned about from a employee point of view, when you were like maybe looking at new opportunities, you would do that outreach to employees like within that business. But that, is a difficult thing as well to get right as well, of course. What would you give advice for? This is both ways from a candidate point of view. So what advice would you give someone maybe looking to come into e-commerce, maybe? Like what would you say are the key things that person needs to think about before picking their home, if you will?
I would say do your research into the company, like with every other job. See what they actually do and see that you're actually passionate about it. Currently, there is a lot of job opportunities, surprisingly, even though we are, I mean, obviously, in some industries, it's very hard to find a job, but I feel like there are a lot of job opportunities out there, even if it is not in e-commerce. So it's really finding, okay, is e-commerce for me? Do I want to do it? Am I passionate about it? Do I want to try it out and see how it goes? Because that's also a reason to enter an industry. Um, so I think number one would be do your research in the industry. Number two would be see what specific role works for you in that industry. Because, for example, product management is completely different in e-commerce compared to if it is, for example, in a gaming company. And I say gaming because it's one of the largest industries in Malta. So that's another aspect to look into, is if you enjoy your role in that industry.
Yeah.
Um, Another aspect would be the benefits. I think the benefits nowadays are a big selling point in companies. If you're working remotely, do they help you set up at home? How much leave do you have? Are they flexible? Things like that. Must you go into the office if you want to go into the office? I think those are the big three. The big three for me.
Love that. Very good. And then from the other side of the coin, like if you were thinking from shop circles point of view or an employee's point of view, like what do you think is like their key things they should be doing to attract talent, would you say as well?
I would say the most important thing is to advertise the benefits, advertise how happy your people are. Because if you have true stories about how people are enjoying work and how they're enjoying coming to work and their experience at work, I think that's a really telling point. There was a company that I saw recently that did this, explained they had their whole company employee book out in the public. So what they did and what they believed in and what benefits they had, and case studies. Well, not really case studies. I don't know what you'd call them, to be honest, but stories from their employees about how they love the company retreat and how they love working with all their colleagues. I think that's really selling when you're looking to employ people. You have to convince them. I mean, as much as you're choosing people, people are also choosing you.
100%. Could not have said it any better myself. It's very, very true. I think that gets lost sometimes. Depending on the size of business, obviously, as well. People, employers sometimes think, well, of course they'll want to come work for me, so we won't need to do the sell too much about why we are the place they should be picking. But I must admit, I think the last sort of few years there's been a huge, I think since the pandemic, there's been a huge switch on that in terms of companies know they've got to do more to attract the right talent to keep them ahead of their competitors as well.
And but growing on that as well, adding to that is that I think one of the biggest mistakes a lot of companies do, which is a really pity in my opinion, is just not responding. So let's say you apply somewhere and they may respond for a week, you have an interview, you go to a second interview, which quite frankly, if you're in a product management role, requires so much time to get to that second interview, because sometimes you have case studies, sometimes you have it could take 12 hours to prepare for this interview. And then they just don't reply. They essentially ghost you, if you want to use the millennial Gen Z
Yeah.
terms. But it's quite horrible. And I would never, if I had then heard that one of my friends was applying to that same company, I was like, don't bother. It really says a lot about the management in that company when they ghost people.
Yep. Very, very good. That's very, very true. All right, I think that's all for today, to be fair. So I've loved having a conversation with you and chatting about when Shop Circle sounds like it's going from strength to strength. And yeah, I love the sort of the transition you had from developer into product. And look forward to seeing where you are in a year's time again, and maybe a 2.0 version of this in a year's time, Sarah.
I would love that, Luke. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It was really exciting and really happy to be here.
Good. Again, well, thank you so much, and I look forward to catching up again very soon.
Thank you.